Good afternoon, everyone. We'll
Good
get
afternoon.
things started. So lovely to have you all here for our second talk of the year. Today's talk is with the incredible David Cooper. Oh, if I could just ask everyone just to turn your microphones off and your cameras off, that would be fantastic. Thank you so much. So today's talk is with the incredible David Cooper. So David is a psychotherapeutic counsellor, and today's talk is all around setting boundaries with those we love. The talk will be around 45 minutes long, and then we've got 15 minutes at the end for any questions or any reflections that you might have. So please do use the chat facility as we go. So again, we just ask all cameras and mics to be off, just helps with the flow of the talk. And this will be recorded and available after on our YouTube channel for any distribution. So without further ado, David, over to you.
Thank you very much, Lucy. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for all of you for joining me today for a talk on the subject of relationship dynamics. I just want to let you all know I developed a bit of a cold this morning, so if we've got a little bit of sniffing going on or a cough or I need to stop to blow my nose, I apologise now. Also, if you hear any snoring, it's not me. My 4-year-old Labrador is down here beside me fast asleep. She has a tendency to snore, so yeah, if you hear it, I apologise, but the microphone I'm sure won't pick it up. We've titled this presentation Setting Boundaries with Our Loved Ones, which will be our primary focus. However, we're also going to explore various other aspects that are indicative of the transformations and shifts that are currently occurring in contemporary relationships. So we should start as normal with a little bit about me. My name is David Cooper, as Lucy said, and I'm an integratively trained psychotherapeutic counsellor. Now, the term integrative simply means I'm trained in a number of different counselling modalities, so I can utilise a number of different methods to build a bespoke treatment package depending on each individual's needs. I'm a professionally accredited member of the National Counselling and Psychotherapeutic Society and a certified couples and family therapist. As well as my own private clients, I'm an affiliate counsellor for Bupa, for Anxiety UK, and of course for the Electrical Industries Charity. The methods that I use for treating relationship issues are based on research. They're mostly American, based on research by American psychologist Albert Ellis, who is the founder of what is known as rational emotive behaviour therapy. Also methods and processes that are taught by John Gottman, who is the founder of the Gottman Relationship Institute based in Seattle, Washington, and also Harville Hendricks and Helen LaKelly Hunt, who are founders of Imago Couples Therapy, also based in the USA. Everything I'm sharing with you today comes either from my own empirical experience as a relationship therapist, or where theory is concerned, from scientific evidence that's publicly available from reliable sources. Now, also as a little extra, I'm an ADHD clinical services provider. Now, we might ask what relevance has that got to a discussion about relationships, but I mention this as it's a crucial consideration in what we're going to be discussing today. Not only ADHD, but any neurodevelopmental disorder. The presentation today is intended to be inclusive, but all of the subject matter we discuss could have various caveats applied to accommodate the needs of those sections of society that require modifications due to alternative thought processing patterns. Furthermore, we're not only addressing neurodiversity. As therapists, we also have to advocate for individuals suffering from severe anxiety, low self-esteem, issues related to rejection, and any form of insecure attachment resulting from adverse childhood experiences. And any of these conditions and others, some of which I've listed for you on the slide, can have a major impact on the lens through which we view not just other people, but the environment and society around us, including the way we approach and deal with relationships. Right, so now the housekeeping's done, what are we going to be discussing today? Well, the topics of today's talk centre, let me change the slide first, there we go. The topic of today's talk centre around certain key issues that we see in relationships. To some extent, they're relevant not just to the relationships with those that we love, but can also be applied to anyone that we interact with, from couples, families, friendships, to work colleagues, etc. Now, we've already mentioned setting boundaries with those that we love. We're also going to be looking at spotting signs of abuse in relationship, the types of abuse, how they manifest and how we deal with them. We'll be looking at parental relationships, What makes a good parent? Is there a rule book? We're going to be looking at supporting our elders. We're all now living longer, but of course with that comes significant challenges. And if we have time, and it is a big if we have time, we'll also look at the green flags of relationships. Now, this is the roadmap to functional, regulated, and happy relationships. And yes, they do exist, believe it or not. Okay, so we've got a lot to pack in, so we'll jump straight in and let's start looking at boundaries. Now, all relationships need boundaries, not just with those who we have a close or intimate relationship with. For most of us, we spend our life setting boundaries. But why do we need to set boundaries with each other? Surely it'd be better if we all just understood each other, respected that we were all different, recognized each other's needs and didn't over-expect from other people. I think if that were the case, though, I'd probably be out of a job. So boundaries are actually the last step of the triad that you see here on the slide. It's needs, then expectations, and then boundaries. They come in that order, and we have to understand the relevance of the first two to then have a recognition of the necessity for boundaries and why we have to set them. So let's have a look at the needs first. Now, we all have needs, goes without saying. From a therapy perspective, needs refers to the essential requirements that contribute to an individual's mental, emotional, and psychological well-being. These needs can encompass a range of areas, including our basic physical needs, such as food, shelter, and safety, which are foundational for overall well-being. They also encompass our emotional needs, including the need for love, acceptance, and belonging, which are critical for emotional stability and social connections. Psychological needs, such as the need for autonomy, competence, and self-actualization, which relates to personal growth and fulfillment. We have our social needs. This is the desire for relationships, our support systems, and community, and emphasizing the importance of social interactions. And then we also have our cognitive needs. This is the need for knowledge, for understanding, and the ability to make sense of the experiences of the world around us. Now, therapists often work with clients to identify unmet needs and develop strategies to be able to fulfill them, which can then lead to improved mental health and improved life satisfaction. Addressing these needs is key in various therapeutic approaches. But to have all of these needs fulfilled, we can't do it ourselves. Some of them, yes, of course. But love, acceptance, belonging, relationships, support, community, social interaction, we need others, right? And this is where our expectations of others then comes into play. Remember, it was needs, expectations, and then the boundaries. So let's have a look at expectations. It's not just what we expect from others to have our needs fulfilled, but also what others may expect from us for their needs, and then how that level of expectation can impact on us. Most mental anguish in relationships doesn't just come from what others do, but from what you expect them to do. You wait for a call, a gift. We expect their support. But the other person is just doing their own thing. They're not necessarily there for us as we expect them to be. They're simply living by their own rules rather than yours. So when you don't get that support from them that you want, that you expect, it's not reality that collapses. It's just the picture in your head, the construct that you've made up. The method is to separate the real person from the version that you invented and then stop confusing the fantasy with the facts. Now, we do an exercise in the therapy room whereby I ask a client to write down everything they expect from someone else. Things like attention, care, gratitude, understanding, empathy, love, etc. I then ask them to cross out any of those things that they don't receive and leave only what the person actually does in reality. Now, that's often the moment when clarity hits. They weren't actually angry at the other person. They were angry at the story that was living in their own head. That story that was created by their over-expecting. And they can now see how many times they created their own reasons for resentment. In fact, the expectations that we have of our loved ones can actually destroy relationships more easily and in a harsher manner than the person's actual actions themselves. So when expectations disappear, freedom appears. Now, this isn't always relevant in a family situation, but with a partner, if we're continuously seeing someone step over the other's boundaries due to too high expectations, it's unlikely the relationship can survive unless there is radical change. And I can assure you that humans are not good at radical change. Why? It's too scary. Nevertheless, if we can minimize our expectations of others instead of accusations, reality comes into focus. And now the decision can become yours. And this is where strength is born, as opposed to the bitterness and resentment caused by over expectation of other people. So our expectations of others are, in essence, a hidden form of control. You think you're loving and supporting towards them, so you therefore deserve their support in equal measure. But what you're actually trying to manage is someone else's behavior. So that's needs and expectations. Let's move on to the boundaries. What is a boundary? Well, personal boundaries are the rules and limits we set within relationships. We need to have an awareness of our own boundaries, but also the boundaries that others impose on us. Now, there's several types of boundaries that you can see here on the slide. There's the physical boundaries, which refer to personal space and physical touch, an awareness of what is appropriate and what isn't. Our intellectual boundaries, referring to our thoughts and ideas. Healthy intellectual boundaries include respect for others' ideas. And these boundaries are violated when someone dismisses your thoughts or dismisses your ideas. There's the emotional boundaries, and these refer to a person's feelings. Emotional boundaries are violated when someone criticizes or belittles or invalidates another person's feelings. Sexual boundaries, and these refer to the emotional, intellectual, and physical aspects of sexuality. Healthy sexual boundaries involve mutual understanding and the respect of limitations and desires between sexual partners. Sexual boundaries can be violated with unwanted sexual touch, pressure to engage in sexual acts, leering, or sexual comments. We then have the material boundaries. Now that's all about money and possessions. These are violated when someone steals or damages another person's possessions, or when they pressure them to give or lend the possessions to them. And finally, we have time boundaries. Now, this is how a person uses their time. A person with healthy time boundaries can set aside enough time for each facet of their life. These boundaries are violated when another demands too much time of them. So boundaries tell us what's okay and what's not okay in a relationship. Now, if you were to think about maybe a couple of people in your life and think of the boundaries you have with each one, I'm sure you will notice some similarities. But it would also be surprising how different they'd actually be. So aligned with our boundaries are our values. Values are the things that are most important to us, and they're in turn aligned with our own beliefs. It's how we see the world and our place in it. In fact, in the therapy room, we say that values and beliefs are what lead to your life narrative. These values and beliefs are formed from a very young age and are influenced by primary caregivers such as parents, siblings, teachers, religious educators, etc. And these values and beliefs are important in forming our life narrative, as I just said. It's the lens through which we view the world and those people who make up that world. Ideally, our boundaries will reflect our values. So, for example, if you value your family time, you might set strict boundaries at work. It's important to have a level of recognition of what most of our important values are. I'm hearing myself come back. I don't know why that is. I think somebody's probably got a microphone on. Okay. It's important to have a level of recognition of what our most important values are and how do our boundaries reflect these values. It might be worth just taking a moment now to see if you can think about a couple of values that are really important to you and ask yourself if you protect those values with appropriate boundaries. I'll share with you one of mine. Due to various life experiences and my training, I will not now allow anyone to tell me how I should be thinking or feeling. I will respect their right to their own thoughts and feelings, so I expect them to offer me the same in return. Now, is that expectation always met? No, of course not. I'm often gaslighted by others but it's important that I have a recognition that this is part of that other person's values. And then I can have a more realistic idea of what to expect from them, so I don't fall into the trap of over expectation, which, as I have said, will only lead to resentment. Now, I want to caveat what I said earlier with the idea of our boundaries adapting to take consideration of those we are with at any given time. In fact, boundaries should really be the same no matter who we're with. When it comes to the gaslighting I spoke of just now, I don't expect my partner to tell me what I should be thinking and feeling. But of course, I have that same boundary with my whole family, with anyone I work with my friends, my neighbours, and even the lovely lady that serves my coffee in Cafe Nero every Saturday morning. The boundaries remain a constant. It is, however, the expectations that need to change, as each of these people have their own individual values that in turn impact on their own boundaries. Just for a moment, anyone that's come in recently, do you mind if I ask them to just switch their camera off for me? Okay, so as an example, think of a 10-year-old child asking where their sports kit is continuously and being told the same answer time and time again, really crossing most parents' boundaries when they have to repeat themselves. After a while, we'd lose patience. But then compare this to an elderly parent who has dementia. Now, the child, you're teaching or conditioning as they're trying to push your boundaries. But with the elderly parent, you're having to accept the condition and work within the parameters of that person's inability to recognize your boundaries. People who are influential in your life can act as models for boundary setting, whether their boundaries are healthy or unhealthy. So maybe you can think of someone yourself who's helped shape who you are. What has this person taught you about your boundaries, whether intentionally or unintentionally? And then we have 3 different subtypes of boundaries: healthy, rigid, and porous. Now, a person with healthy boundaries can say no to others when they want to, but they're also comfortable opening themselves up to intimacy in close relationships. They value their own opinions. They don't compromise their values for others. They know how to share personal information in an appropriate manner, so they don't under or overshare. And they have an awareness of their own personal wants and needs and are able to communicate them in a healthy manner. And they can be accepting when others say no to them. A person who keeps others at a distance, whether emotionally, physically, or otherwise, is said to have rigid boundaries. They maintain the distance from others to avoid the possibility of rejection. When someone has rigid boundaries, they're reluctant to ask others for help. They're protective of personal information, and they're avoidant of intimacy and close relationships. They might even seem detached in romantic partnerships. When someone has porous boundaries, they overshare personal information. They have difficulty saying no and are overly concerned with others' problems and more dependent on the opinions of others. They can often be more accepting of others' abuse and disrespect. So, for example, if I had porous boundaries, I would allow others to gaslight me, and I would fear rejection if I did not allow them to do so. In some relationships, healthy boundaries seem to form naturally and easily. In other relationships, however, setting healthy boundaries is difficult. It might be worth reflecting again on whether you feel that you can set healthy boundaries, or whether yours are mostly rigid or porous. The simple fact that both of the latter are mechanisms to avoid rejection would suggest that those with rigid or porous boundaries suffer from a degree of insecurity and possibly a lack of self-worth. So, just a few final notes on boundaries before we move on. Although ideally we would be consistent, most people do actually have a mix of different boundary types. So, for example, someone could have healthy boundaries at work, porous boundaries in romantic relationships, and a mix of all 3 types with their family. The appropriateness of boundaries depends heavily on the setting that we're in. What is appropriate to say when we're out with our friends might not be appropriate when we're at work. And we have to always be aware that different cultures will have very different expectations when it comes to boundaries. So, for example, in some cultures, it's inappropriate to express emotions in public, whilst others actively encourage us to do so. So now we move on to our next topic, in regards to trying to maintain healthy relationships. And this is spotting or identifying signs of abuse in a relationship. Now, abuse in relationships can take many forms, including emotional, physical, sexual, and financial abuse. Recognizing the signs of abuse is crucial for both victims and those who wish to support them. Here, we're going to have a brief look at the key indicators of relationship abuse, highlighting emotional manipulation, physical signs, controlling behaviours, and the importance of open communication. One of the first signs of relationship abuse can be emotional manipulation. Now, abusers often use tactics that undermine their partner's self-esteem and create a sense of dependence. That's codependency on the abuser. This may manifest as things such as constant criticism, belittling remarks, or gaslighting, which I've already mentioned. This is where the abuser makes the victim doubt their own perceptions of reality. Victims may find themselves feeling worthless, anxious, or confused due to the abuser's behaviour. Emotional abuse can also include threats to harm you, your children, or your family, or even your pets. And recognising these emotional red flags is essential, as they can actually be a lot more subtle than the more obvious physical signs of abuse. And then we have the physical signs. And though emotional abuse can be insidious, physical abuse often leaves more obvious and tangible marks, unexplained bruises, injuries, frequent accidents. A partner who is frequently seen with injuries might be experiencing physical abuse. Additionally, signs like the victim wearing clothes that cover their whole body, which they wouldn't normally do, like long sleeves in warm weather. And this can be a warning sign. Any physical signs of abuse should be taken seriously and addressed promptly. We also have the controlling behaviours that we need to look out for. This is controlling behaviour from one partner to another. This can include dictating what a partner can wear, who they can see, or how they spend their time. An abuser may isolate their partner from friends and family, creating an unhealthy environment where the victim feels alone and trapped. Monitoring phone calls, demanding to know a partner's whereabouts are also indicators of an unhealthy abusive relationship. As are a partner who verbally humiliates you, demands all your attention, controls your time or who you are, blames you for everything that goes wrong, constantly puts you down, dominates conversations, checks up on you excessively, suggests that they are always the victim, isolating you as the victim, acting as if they own their partner, and lying to make themselves look good. Yes, there are a lot of ways in which someone will attempt to control their partner. Then we have financial abuse, which is restricting a partner's access to money. Now, financial abuse involves controlling a victim's ability to acquire, use, and maintain financial resources on their own. Those who are victimised financially may be prevented from working, or the abuser may attempt to control how they use the money that they earn. Research shows us that victims often are too concerned about their own ability to provide financially or for themselves and their children to end the relationship. Financial security is also one of the top reasons women return to an abusive partner. Men can be victims of this abuse as well, because financial abuse is recognised as a form of domestic violence, and approximately 1 in 7 men 18 years and older will experience a form of domestic violence. And then we have sexual abuse. I'm going to purposely say very little about sexual abuse today. It's far too big a topic and too complex in its nature to try and compress into the time that we have. I am going to give you the definition, however, of sexual abuse as provided by a respected online therapy source. Sexual abuse is any sexual act or attempt to obtain a sexual act by violence or coercion, acts to traffic a person, or acts directed against a person's sexuality, regardless of the relationship to the survivor. For rape specifically, the legal definition is penetration of another person without consent, and I've paraphrased that to remove more graphic references. This comes from our Sexual Offences Act of 2003. Sexual violence is considered to be one of the most traumatic, pervasive, and most common human rights violations, and it remains highly stigmatised in all settings. So how do we combat abuse in relationships? As we've just demonstrated, it comes in many and varied forms. So for the outsider, or someone who's trying to support a victim or what we call a survivor, what can we do? Well, the first is the importance of open communication. Identifying signs of abuse requires not only awareness, but also open and honest communication. Encouraging conversations about boundaries and feelings can create a safe space for victims to express their concerns. Friends and family should be attuned to the changes in a loved one's behaviour or mood, as these can be signs of distress. And if someone suspects that a friend or a loved one is in an abusive relationship, it's important to approach the situation with empathy and compassion, offering support without judgment. Recognising signs of abuse in a relationship involves looking for emotional manipulation, physical signs and controlling behaviours. And by fostering open communication, friends and family can provide that necessary support to individuals in these abusive situations. With increased awareness and understanding, the victims can then be empowered to seek help themselves and take steps towards a healthier and safer future. Understanding and identifying the signs can make a profound difference in the lives of those affected by relationship abuse, offering them the hope and support they need to escape their circumstances. Okay, let's move on. Let's move on to something a little less sombre, a little bit more cheerful, and that's parental relationships. So, what makes a good parent? Well, there's no rule book as such. Plenty of self-help books for sure, and we can guarantee that AI these days has plenty to say about how best to bring up our children. But even with all the guidance in the world, we're all going to do it differently. And that's okay, isn't it? Well, yes and no. Yes, it's fine that we're all different in how we bring up our kids. It's going to be based on our own upbringing for the main part, along with the other things we've picked up along the way from family members, friends, peer groups, educators, and in this day and age, possibly even influencers. Talking of which, you might think that the modern landscape, the recent changes in the environment, and the way that we now live would impact on our relationship with our children and the way in which we bring them up. But does it really? We're all familiar with our parents and grandparents saying, it was better in my day. And maybe it was better for them, but not necessarily better for our children now. Now, I always say that music and fashion are possibly some of the best examples of change across the decades. I was lucky enough to have lived my adolescent and emerging adult years in the late 1970s and early 1980s. So I'm the back end of the baby boomers and the start of Generation X, and I'm proud to be so. My music was all punk, ska, electronic, soul, funk, and new romantic. I went from a safety pin through the ear to a smart suit with drainpipe trousers to then baggy brogues and a headscarf around my neck. As a young child, I could go out on a Saturday at 10 in the morning and not return until 4 p.m. in time for my tea. And I had no mobile phone for my parents to call me on or even monitor all of my movements on their Life 360 app. Now, I'm sure we've all heard that sort of thing before, someone going on and on about how their childhood was better than how it is now. And as you can tell, I thought I had a brilliant childhood. I think I was really lucky. But when I relate all of this to my now 19-year-old daughter, I simply get a look of disdain as she goes back to messaging her mates, checking in on the latest TikTok videos and deciding which influencer is going to persuade her to part with her hard-earned cash when she needs more makeup or clothing. But is that really any worse than we had? No, it's just different. In the same way that it's been different for every generation as time moves on, and we become more capable as a human race. Today's influencer is doing no different than the TV and magazines would do 40 years ago. As I said, fashion is cyclic in the same way that I now like to listen to the Frank Sinatras, Barbra Streisands and the classical tracks that my parents maybe once did. Maybe one day my daughter will listen to Spandau Ballet and the Sex Pistols rather than Taylor Swift and Harry Styles. There are certain recognisable shifts in relationship dynamics that have occurred in recent years. Certainly for our millennials and good old Generation Z or Z. In psychology, we talk about the triangulation of 3 different ego states: parent, child, and adult. Now, as adults, we can all exist in any one of these at any given time. So although I'm an adult, I can act in a childlike manner sometimes. I can also try to parent other adults as well as my own children. I only have to use words or phrases such as should, ought to, must, always, never, don't, you're wrong, for once and for all, let me fix that, I'll take care of it. All of these are very much being in a parent ego state. But one of the things that's becoming more evident is the way that our young people are becoming more empowered by what they experience online. And this is leading to a switch in that parent-child role, as it's our children that are trying to educate us in this new digital world that we don't embrace in the way that they do, or in the sort of way that might now be necessary. Parental alienation is a term that is most recognised when parents break up from each other and one disallows the other to see the children. But this same sense of alienation is now becoming evident due to parents not recognising or understanding the modern landscape that our children face. Now, in his book, The Anxious Generation, the author Jonathan Haidt sheds light on the psychological effects of technology on youth and the needs for parents to guide their children's online interactions and be able to foster critical thinking skills amongst the digital deluge that has now hit us. In addition to teaching critical thinking skills, Haidt's research highlights several key points regarding the impact of technology and social media on today's youth. The first is the increase in mental health issues. Now, there's a correlation between the rise of social media usage and an increase in anxiety and depression among adolescents, leading to a significant rise in self-harm and suicide rates, especially among young girls. There's the erosion of our face-to-face skills. The constant digital interaction has raised concerns about young people's ability to engage in meaningful face-to-face conversations and develop empathy. There's a dependency on social validation. Social media platforms create a dependency on external validation through the likes and comments, negatively affecting self-esteem and self-worth, particularly in teenagers. We have information overload. I get that all the time. That's limitless access to information, and it can overwhelm young minds and expose them to inappropriate content. It creates polarization. Social media reinforces one's own beliefs without exposing them to differing viewpoints, leading to that increased polarization. And so we have the importance of parental guidance. Now, Haidt emphasizes the crucial role of parents in guiding their children's digital consumption, setting boundaries, we're back to them again, and encouraging offline activities to build resilience and critical thinking skills. But whilst we, as parents, need to have an understanding of the changing landscape and how it impacts our children and adolescents, the basics still remain the same. The fundamentals of a good parent-child relationship is now different now to how it's always been. But what does contribute to a strong parent-child relationship? Not just as young children, but as they move through their adolescence and into emerging adults. Well, in the early 1950s, the psychoanalyst named Erik Erikson built upon Sigmund Freud's theory of psychosexual development. And he suggested that there are 8 sequential stages of individual human development influenced by biological, psychological, and social factors throughout the lifespan. Now, I haven't listed out all of Erikson's stages, as that gets very theory-based, and you can easily look them up for yourself if you want. What I have done, however, is incorporate some of his theory into what is recognised as the 5 main areas now that need to be considered in order to foster healthy parent-child relationships. So the first one, early attachment. Early attachment to parents plays a crucial role in shaping the quality of our parent-adult-child relationships. Research shows that when children develop secure attachment to their parents, they're much more likely to feel motivated to assist their parents in later life. Children can form secure attachments to their parents by spending quality time together during childhood and maintaining this connection into adulthood. Erikson's theory showed that crucial building blocks, such as trust and self-worth and having a sense of purpose, all start to develop before we're even 5 years old. The second is quality time together. It's the consideration of that necessity for quality time. A study found that families who spent more time together, regardless of the activity, were much more likely to have stronger bonds. Both parents and adult children reported higher satisfaction in their relationships, highlighting that quality family time helps maintain these bonds and can reduce negative outcomes. So this means being present and engaged, prioritising things like family meal times, talking regularly, and supporting and participating in your children's hobbies. Again, according to Erikson, by being present for our children, we help them to succeed. And when they do this, they feel more industrious and they believe that they have the capacity to set their own goals and, more importantly, to reach them. Being a good parent also means open communication. Now, effective and honest communication is often considered the cornerstone of any healthy relationship. It fosters trust, respect, and understanding, making it much easier for both parents and children to navigate challenges and changes. Now, that idea of honesty is important here, as it's not just about being honest with each other, but also being honest with ourselves, taking ownership of our own behaviour. This isn't something we can expect from our younger children, but it's important that we embrace a policy of honesty as adults. One way to maintain these strong relationships with children is by keeping communication open and addressing issues with kindness. Recent research suggests that when disagreements arise, by avoiding defensiveness and expressing a desire to understand your adolescent child's perspective, it demonstrates that you don't need to be right and you value their input. Now, of course, we also need to show emotional support. Now, one aspect of my own parenting style that, yes, I've developed because I'm a counsellor, is that I'm confident that it's consistently offering encouragement, empathy, and understanding, as I believe it plays a crucial role in fostering my children's and now grandchildren's sense of security and well-being, particularly through adolescence and into emerging adulthood. That emotional support will eventually end up coming back to me, I hope. So, for instance, my adult children have now supported me when I face certain physical health challenges, creating a reciprocal dynamic between us and strengthening our family as a whole. And then we have mutual respect. Now, many of my clients have shared how difficult it is for them to let go and fully acknowledge their child's autonomy and independence. As challenging as it might be, this respect is crucial, as research has shown that over-involvement or failure to honour children's independence can strain the relationship. This again starts at a very young age. Erickson stated that the need for autonomy begins from as young as 18 months old. The ability to be able to go to the toilet on our own, to be able to tie our own shoelaces, etc. Children who can be independent throughout their formative years will believe in themselves and feel secure in their own ability. Those that aren't given the chance to assert themselves may then battle with feelings of inadequacy and self-doubt. It is, of course, a bit of a cliche that respect is earned, but teaching our children the value in respecting others and even how to accept respect from others is crucial not only to their development, but also our relationship with them. Okay, so that's our relationship as parents to our children. Now we're going to have a look at how we support our own elderly parents. I've previously mentioned that at some point in our lives, the tables turn. Those parents who have hopefully been there for us throughout our childhood, adolescence, and adult life now need the support of us, their children. And this is quite pertinent to me at present, and I don't mind sharing it with you, but believe it or not, I'm actually 61 years old. Now, I'd like to think that I don't need to be overly supported by my adult children at this time of my life, but I am in that position whereby I need to be there for my parents and those of my partner. Without oversharing with you, I lost my stepmother last year, so my father, at 86 years old, is now living on his own, but he manages. I'm lucky that he still has all of his cognitive faculties and his mobility. My in-laws' need is far greater, and we're actually currently in talks with care homes, as it's beyond the time when they are in need of round-the-clock care. But the issue is this: they don't want it. They don't want to move into a care home. They want to stay in the same home they've been in for over 50 years. They want to stay together rather than be separated, and they want their family to be there for them rather than strangers. All of which, of course, is understandable, but unfortunately not possible. Certainly not in my case, anyway. Now, life expectancy at birth in the UK is 83 years old for females and a fraction over 79 years for males. This is an increase of 18 weeks since 2019 to 2021, so it's quite significant. We all know we get to live longer these days, but if I look at the elderly in my own family, they've somewhat exceeded average mortality. And of course, the older we get, the less we can do for ourselves. And more importantly, our subconscious is constantly telling us that we can no longer do what we used to be able to do. And what's more, we now never will be able to. That's a hard pill to swallow. So many of the elderly population now rely on others to allow them to live that life that they once had, if they can. Which means in today's society, our elderly now have an expectation of being looked after. Of course, in certain cultures, this has always been the norm, particularly in many South Asian and Eastern Mediterranean families. It's always been that the family home remains the constant. being handed down from generation to generation. So it becomes natural for the children to be able to look after their elders. And this is fine if there's someone who can be permanently available to them. But in today's society, where it's now more the norm than the expectation to have both adults out working, it's often not feasible to provide permanent family care for our elderly loved ones. And actually, this is getting harder. Legislation now dictates that if someone needs care, particularly nursing care, in most cases, this will need to be paid for if your total capital and savings exceed £23,250, particularly if you need to go into a nursing home. So this alone now puts the family home at threat. We also have a ripple effect whereby, because parents are supporting their children for longer these days, they're helping them to buy their own cars and their first homes. They no longer then have that wealth themselves when they reach their old age, again putting their main asset, their home, under potential threat. So how do we approach our relationship with our elders? Well, it actually comes back to those indicators that we considered earlier on, the needs, expectations, and boundaries. But this time it's a little different, because this time we need to be able to recognise our elders' needs a lot of the time without them telling us, as either they don't know that themselves or they're in denial. Also, we have to realise that they're likely to have expectations of us that may exceed what we are actually able to do for them, as we just don't have the time, the capacity, or sometimes even the financial ability to do so. And this is where our boundaries then come in. We need to have the ability to accept that sometimes in life there is a difference between what we are able to do for others in comparison to what they think they need from us. When we've done as much as we can do, or even willing to do, we then need to have what is termed as radical acceptance. Now, radical acceptance is a term that's taken from what is called dialectical behaviour therapy, and it's a distress tolerance skill that involves complete, total and non-judgmental acceptance of the reality, even when it's painful or undesirable. It means accepting facts as they are rather than fighting them, to prevent pain from turning into suffering. It's not approval or resignation, but rather accepting things as they are in the present in order to reduce emotional stress. Now, this is difficult to do, but we're able to assist ourselves in doing so by recognising the fact that as our parents get older, particularly as they become cognitively and physically impaired, they are actually returning to that child ego state that we mentioned earlier. And that actually in these circumstances, that's okay. It's okay to set boundaries in the same way that we would do with our children. So we can't avoid now being at a stage whereby we have to parent our own parents. But now it can be done with empathy. And we can remove any feelings of guilt that we have for having to treat our parents in such a way. So we need to be able to adopt a non-judgmental behaviour due to our parents' move back towards their inner child. We need to fulfil their needs as best we can whilst maintaining our own boundaries. So, very quickly, what are the key support strategies that we can utilise to best meet elderly parents' needs? Communication and respect. Approach conversations about care with sensitivity, acknowledging their loss of independence and involving them in decision making. Make safety improvements. Modify their home environment by adding grab bars, improving lighting, removing trip hazards. Very obvious, I know. Health management. Assist with their medication. Attend doctor's visits with them if you can, and monitor chronic conditions. Allow for social connection. Encourage their hobbies, their phone calls, and local activities to prevent isolation. And establish routine. Maintain familiar routine for daily tasks, meals and bedtimes in order to provide stability. One moment, shush, good girl. Right, also we need to help arrange support services. We have home care. Consider hired caregivers, Meals on Wheels services or home adaptations to maintain independence. Think about technology that they could use, personal alarms or telecare systems for their safety. And look for other professional advice. Contact local councils or organisations like Age UK for financial assessments and care options. Don't forget the caregiver self-care. You need to look after yourselves when looking after your elderly relatives. So seek support, share responsibilities with siblings or your family members. Remember to take breaks and utilise respite care to avoid burnout. And don't forget to set those boundaries. Be realistic about the level of care you can provide long term. And we're all going to have to approach difficult conversations with our elderly parents. And If they get difficult, if they refuse to help, be patient, frame the discussion around safety and maintaining their independence in their own home, if possible, but if not, allowing them to have those same luxuries if they have to move out. Now, I'm very aware of the time. It is 1:45, and I did say we probably wouldn't get to relationship green flags, which we're not going to do. But if you want to see them just quickly, I'll pull them up on the slide. They're the things that you need to have in a healthy relationship. Appreciation, balance, commitment, commonality, conflict resolution, effective communication, empathy, honesty, independence, intimacy, safety, and self-confidence. And you can find it all online, I'm sure, if you want to look more into the green flags of relationships. Right, so
David, that was amazing, can I just say?
you're
Thank you
very welcome.
so much. It was such an emotive talk, and my mum is actually in a care home. So when you were talking, there were so many things that were coming up for me and reflections, and just that change of looking at her going into child ego state,
Yeah.
I was like, wow, I think there's sometimes I definitely have looked back at times when I've been maybe a bit more frustrated than I should have been. But I think just reframing it like that as, yeah, it took so much from that.
It's a very difficult situation when you're realizing that you are beginning to parent your own parents.
Yeah,
It's very, very difficult to do, and it
yeah.
does cause a lot of emotion, but we all get there, or most of us will get there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, just took so much from it. Something that really made me smile was your reflections on your childhood,
Mhm.
and a conversation I recently had with my oldest brother and him talking about his childhood was the best because social media just kind of started coming in when I was in my teenage years, but his was the best because he didn't have any of that and things, and it's just different, like you said. I think that's something that's or I think to take from that, and when those conversations do arise, sometimes I think, how can you say yours is the best? But it's just different, isn't it?
We all do it. I mean, there is an argument to say that actually the 60s, 70s, and 80s and early 90s were very, very good decades to grow up in because we had moved on from, we're post-war,
Yeah,
etc. And time, there was more money about, etc., etc. And of
yeah.
course, it was before the digital revolution. But
Mm,
yeah, so I do
yeah,
consider myself lucky to have been
yeah.
at that time. But as you say, just different.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad I was just on the cusp, I think, of social media, and it's actually a question that I put in there.
Mm,
We have got some questions and some reflections for you, David. So,
sure.
Tom's put, how can you respond when someone reacts badly to a boundary?
When someone reacts badly to a boundary, you need to try and maintain that boundary. Understand that your boundaries is there for a reason, and if you make them too fluid, then they don't become boundaries anymore. If in the moment you want to add some fluidity to it to make them feel better about it, but it's going to depend, I think, on what the specific boundary is that they're reacting badly to. But you have to
Mm,
remember that you've put that boundary in there for a reason. So all that you can really do is explain to them, look, I understand that this might upset you or frustrate you, and that's fine. You're allowed to be so because that's down to you. But you've also got to understand that I've put this boundary in for a reason. So
mm,
it's about being able to step into each other's narrative, is what we call it. And so we need to be able to see it from the other person's side and why they've reacted badly and give
mm,
them empathy for and understanding for doing so. But it doesn't mean we drop that boundary because we want the same to come from them. They need to respect us as well. So
yeah,
it might be if they're able to explain to you why they've reacted badly that you might then want to adjust the boundary, of course. But that's obviously where we get to that point where we are able to accommodate both points of views and we can compromise.
yeah, yeah. And again, that piece around communication, like you said, the importance of communication is everything, isn't it? And yeah.
Communication is the single biggest topic that gets brought up in couples therapy.
Mm, yeah, I can so imagine, especially from yeah, but
Yeah.
like I think it's something that you feel like it should be so easy just to be able to say, well, I'm feeling like this, but
Mm.
especially with your loved ones, it can be really challenging, can't it? You
Yeah.
can probably stop sharing your screen now, David, as well.
Okay, I was just going
Yeah,
to say, Lucy, if people can still see the slides, can they?
they can still see the
That
slide.
I was
Yeah,
just going to where we were talking there, but for a moment about couples therapy. If anybody's really interested, in further couples therapy. You could do a lot worse. It's on BBC iPlayer. It's an American couples therapist. It's just called Couples Therapy, and it is absolutely brilliant. So
I can't
yeah,
agree
go and
more.
have a look in there. You'll learn an awful lot, and it's actually a lot of it is quite good fun. Anyway, I shall stop sharing.
Yeah,
There you
it's
go.
brilliant couples therapy. I absolutely love it as well. So I concur definitely. So this one actually came from myself. How do you implement boundaries with children and social media use?
Whoa,
Yeah.
Christ. Have you got another hour? Um, it's again, it's down to you as parents, really,
Mhm.
because there are arguments for and against. You might be aware now that certain, I mean, in Australia, they're implementing the boundaries anyway, because where they're not allowing children to be on certain social media sites now till they're 16. Schools in the UK are also doing it, so we've got handy mobile phones in, etc., when they go into school, getting them back when they come out. But as far as parents go, it's really down to what you think works best for your children. They have to understand that social media is the use of social media is a privilege still, rather than I know they think it's the norm, but in exactly the same way that as adults, we get to use our time as we want to and we can choose, whereas as children we can't.
Yeah,
It's the same when it comes to social media. They
yeah,
have to abide by our rules, but the rules that we put in need to be respectful rules. And if it comes to it, and the child, ideally what you want is the child to be able to hang on to their mobile device and that we trust them that they'll do as they're told. So if we turn around and say, right, you've got 10 minutes on there and then come off, please, for a couple of hours because you've been on there since you got home from school, that they'll respect that. Now, we know a lot of children will just try and push their luck. Of course they would. I did as a child.
yeah.
But if that's the case, we then move on to that age-old tactic of deprivation, and that's taking the
Mhm,
phone off them.
mhm, mhm.
So, and then, take it off them for the rest of the day, and then they'll get
Yeah,
it back. So this is what I say, there's when it comes to the requirements of living in the modern technical age, some of those old tactics that we would have used and parents have used for years and years and years, the cliches, we do it because they work.
yeah, yeah.
So
Something that came up when you were saying that was consistency, and that I guess that's key with boundaries, isn't it? That you're consistent, and when you're implementing them. So it is just if this happens, yeah, this is the phone's getting
the
taken
other thing
away.
with consistency, of course, is consistency between the two parents, because your
Mm.
children will try and play one off against the other.
Yeah.
And if they know that mum is going to let you be on the phone for longer than dad, when dad says, right, put your phones away now, they'll go, mum, and so on, so on and so forth. Anything with parenting, when it comes to setting rules or directions or guides for your children, we ideally want not just parents to be on the same page, but they need to be on the same paragraph. In fact, the
Mhm.
same sentence, if they can be.
Yeah,
Otherwise, your children are very clever. They'll play one off against the other.
absolutely. We've got another question here. If you feel a boundary being crossed within a family dynamic, how can this be best addressed?
Ooh, okay. And it happens a lot. And it needs to be addressed with caution. What I would suggest is you need to ask yourself first, how is that boundary crossing affecting you? Okay. Because it's a bit of a cliche in counseling as well, but you are only responsible for your actions. You can't be responsible for the actions of other people. All right. So if they're crossing a boundary with you, then deal with it directly with them in exactly the same way that we've said before. When you did this, when you said this, it's best if you can say, bring it back to yourself. So bring it back to the I. All right. So it's when you said that thing, when you acted in that way, when you behaved in that manner, this is how it made me feel. All right. Now, if
Yeah.
you do that, you're not actually criticizing the other person. You're just saying, this is what you did. You crossed my boundary and you made me feel that way. It's then up to them whether they're willing to address it. If
Mm,
they're not willing to address it, well, you know where they stand, you know where you stand, and you're going to have to beg to differ. And that
mhm.
can create a bit of a problem, but there is not necessarily an answer to it.
Yeah.
However, if it is not a boundary, if it's not your boundary that's been crossed, so let's say that someone has crossed your partner's boundaries, don't go and step in. Don't be the one, it's all as particularly as husbands, I guess we want to stick up for our wives, etc., etc. But check in with your partner first to make sure that their boundary has also been crossed, because it might be
Mhm.
that it hasn't. And so they're now suddenly, what are you doing that for?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
If your partner wants you to step in and help them with their boundaries, that's fine. If not, leave it to them to do so.
Yeah.
Because it's then, as I said, you can't kind of turn around and say things like, that's how you made me feel, when it's not your boundary that's been crossed. Yeah.
Owning your feelings.
Your
Yeah.
feelings, yeah, but then discuss them with the person whose boundary's been crossed, as
Yeah.
opposed to the person that's done the boundary crossing.
Amazing. Thank you. We've got another question here. What makes setting boundaries with people we love harder than setting them with strangers?
Because, okay, if we set a boundary with someone that we love, we're effectively saying to them, you can't do that. All right. You can't. It's not. You don't get to do that. I always remember. I don't know if how many people out there would have used to have watched Friends on TV, but there was a phrase that was used in Friends all the time, mostly by Jennifer Anderson and Courtney Cox. They'd say to one of the others, one of the boys, "You don't get to do that." All right, and that's that hard boundary being put up, and that can be quite difficult sometimes with loved ones, because we don't want to say no to them. We don't want to refuse them. We want to be open to them to fulfill their needs, because that's why they want to cross the boundary, because they have needs that need to be met. And with us putting the boundary up, the need isn't going to be met. When it comes to strangers, however, we don't have that close connection. And actually setting a boundary, it's like, well, like it or not. And if you don't like it, then I don't really, it doesn't bother me that much if you're not going to be part of my life, or you're not going to respect that, because I don't live with you day in, day out, or I don't have to see you once a week or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is also why they say when you do meet strangers, so if you go into a new group that you've not been in before, if you start a new job, etc., set your boundaries straight away. Make sure that people are aware of where your boundaries are, because they'll accept them a lot easier than if they see you as a certain person and a couple of months down the line you suddenly put this boundary up. They're like, whoa, where's that come from?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Absolutely. Just being transparent, I
absolutely.
suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Be true to yourself.
Yeah. We're just coming up to the end. So there's a couple of reflections at the bottom here. What is considered oversharing? We've got from Leanne.
That's a good question, because you'd have heard me say a couple of times about not oversharing with you. I'm only going to give it to you from the counselling perspective, okay? Because it's one of the first rules we have in college is don't overshare with the client. But what we need our clients to know is that we also have a level of empathy and positive regard for them. And what our clients like to know is that if we've been in the same sort of situation they have, then it makes it easier for them to be able to open up. So when I'm doing relationship counselling, if I get someone come in who's been through a divorce, now I've been divorced twice, all right? So I'm quite happy to share that with them, and we'll sit and talk about it to some degree. I'm not going to talk about horrid ex-wives or anything like that, but we'll go through, we can share certain things, because it allows them to understand that I'm on that page with them, and that what I'm telling them is from my own experience as well, from all of the theory that I've done. So I would say if it is relevant and helpful to the situation, then share. Oversharing is when it's just not needed, and you have to ask yourself why you're doing it. And it probably comes back to your own insecurities, because you want other people to validate you as an individual.
Okay, thank you, David. And then finally, we've got one from Louise. It's so hard with the elderly as they don't want our help. That was just a reflection that came in.
I would agree that they don't want their help. They go a long time thinking they can do it themselves. And we have a lot of situations whereby they have this belief they'll keep doing it, and we have to let that happen until it gets to the point where they begin to recognize themselves they just can't. And unfortunately, a lot of the time that means them falling over. That means them forgetting to feed themselves. It means them forgetting to take their medication and therefore falling ill. And it's not until it gets to that point where they can see for themselves and recognize, okay, I do need that help. It is a difficult situation, because we all want to be able to get in there early to make sure that no harm comes to elders. But we get stubborn as we get older, because we don't want to take on board that information of, I can't do this anymore. That's a really hard pill to swallow, as I said. I mean, I experienced it myself many years ago because I had a shoulder injury and it meant I couldn't play golf anymore. And golf was my life. And to suddenly not be able to do that, now that's just one thing. But if you take that and multiply it 30-fold for an old person, suddenly not being able to do X, Y, and Z,
Yeah,
it's tough. So we need to be able to give them the autonomy as long as we can.
yeah. David, you've been amazing. Thank you so much. We've
You're very
literally just hit
welcome.
1 o'clock. Went so quickly, so
It did.
quickly. And a topic we could definitely talk for hours about.
Yeah.
Just thank you so much, and thank
No,
you
you're
to
very
everyone
welcome.
for joining. We've popped a feedback form on the chat box. If you wouldn't mind just filling it in, that would be absolutely fantastic. And if anything's come up for you throughout the chat, the welfare team, we're all here to support you. So we've popped the number and the support email in there. Thank you so much, David. It's
You're
been an
welcome.
absolute
Thank you,
pleasure.
Lucy, and thanks for everybody that joined us today. So
Lovely.
see you again.
Take
Thanks.
care.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye.